Hi, it's Tom Mayers. I'm just going to read you some of the book, Sarasota Bay Mangroves, 1991, Past Alterations and Future Possibilities. So, this is the introduction, page 3. It says mangroves. Mangroves are one of the most prominent features of Sarasota Bay. They exist on islands in the bay as an interrupted fringe and around the shoreline of the bay, and in ditches, canals, and bayous. They have been destroyed in these places to make way for human development and have adapted to the various perturbations by inhabiting some of these human made landforms. The primary geographic area of mangroves in Florida lies along the coast of South Florida between Cape Canaveral on the east and Tarpon Springs on the west, and the Florida Keys. Mangroves exist worldwide as tropical trees and shrubs and have adapted to loose, wet soils, saline habitat, periodic tidal submergence, and usually have degrees of vivipary of propagules. Although there are more than 12 families and more than 50 species of plants throughout the tropics designated as mangroves, we have only 3 halophytic species we call mangroves in Florida. These trees are red mangrove, black mangrove, and white mangrove. These trees, along with the buttonwood tree that is sometimes called a mangrove, and other plants in their association, dominate the shoreline vegetation of Sarasota Bay. Mangrove is a catch-all, botanically diverse, non-taxonomic expression given to these trees, which can mean an individual specimen or an entire plant community. There are many factors controlling mangrove distribution, and the 4 major factors are climate, salt water, tidal fluctuation, and substrate. Sarasota Bay is near the northern limit for dominant mangrove growth on the Gulf Coast. The climate dictates that the mangroves stay in this subtropical zone and limits them from growing much farther north into the temperate zone. They are highly susceptible to freeze damage, with black mangrove the most tolerant to cold weather. North of this subtropical zone, the Spartina grass replaces the mangroves as the dominant shoreline vegetation. The black mangrove persists as a stunted, stressed plant that sparsely populates these Spartina areas of the North Gulf Coast over to Mexico, where the mangroves become dominant as the climate becomes subtropical again. The red and white mangroves are rare or absent in this temperate zone. Page 4, saltwater marshes. The saltwater marshes are most intimately associated with mangrove vegetation. The northern extent of the mangroves is as scattered individuals in salt marshes, and the southern extension of salt marshes is as small colonies or an understory of vegetation in the mangrove swamps. Both have nearly identical requirements of water, soil, and tide conditions, and afford a good idea of the intimate alternation of the 2 types of plant communities. Low temperature is the critical factor that limits the northern extension of the mangroves. On the other hand, most of the salt marsh plants range from the tropical to the north temperate zone, and few are definitely temperate zone species. In many cases, it seems that the salt marsh vegetation decreases southward because of increasing competition with mangroves, as well as because of temperature differences. Page 5, mangrove definition. The term mangrove includes both the type of vegetation and the species composing it. It is, however, more an ecological than a taxonomic concept. Mangrove plants are typically adapted to fixation in loose, wet soils, a dominantly saline habitat, and periodic submergence by tides. They exhibit different degrees of vivipary of the fruits and seeds, and typically xeromorphic adaptations, and have respiratory roots. Some botanists include only Rhizophoraceae among the mangroves, but a number of genera of other families should be included. In Florida, only 3 species, Rhizophora mangle, Avicennia natita, or Lagunculata racemosa, are mangroves. A 4th commonly associated species, Conocarpus erecta, the buttonwood, is not a mangrove because it does not have enough of the characteristics given above, although it grows in parts of the swamps and forms a transitional zone between the flooded zone and the inland type of vegetation.